Hello and welcome. Today we're going to dive into some really fascinating science from the book, The Willpower Instinct. This actually started as one of the most popular courses at Stanford University, and it's all about understanding that little voice in your head. You know the one that says, just one more episode, even when you know you should have been asleep an hour ago.
It's a question we've all asked ourselves, right? I mean, why is it such a struggle to do the things we know are good for us? Are we just lazy, or is there something deeper, something biological going on inside our brains?
You know the feeling. You make a promise to yourself, tonight I am definitely going to bed early.
Or maybe it's, okay, today's the day. The diet really starts now.
Or you swear you'll finish that big report this afternoon, and yet the day ends and somehow nothing's changed. If any of this sounds familiar, I've got good news. It's not a character flaw. It's actually a battle playing out inside your head.
So the core idea of the book is this. Every single one of us has two competing versions of ourselves. Think of it as one brain, but with two different minds, and they are constantly wrestling for control. On one side, you've got your impulsive self. This is the ancient, instinctual part of your brain that just wants immediate pleasure. It sees a cookie, and it screams, "Eat it now!" But on the other side, you've got your wiser self. This part is run by your modern prefrontal cortex. It's the planner, the one that thinks about long-term goals, like being healthy or getting that promotion. And pretty much every willpower challenge is just these two cells going head-to-head. And what's really crucial here is that willpower isn't just one thing. It's actually made up of three different forces. You have I will power, that's what drags you out of bed to go to the gym. You have I won't power, that's what helps you say no to the donuts in the break room. And then, maybe most importantly, there's I want power. That's the force that helps you remember your big, long-term goals when a short-term temptation pops up. Real self-control is all about keeping these three in balance. Okay, now here is where things get really interesting. Willpower is not some unlimited resource you just have. It's much more like a muscle, and if you use it too much, it gets tired, it gets exhausted. This isn't a moral failing, it's just straight-up biology. There's a famous experiment that shows this perfectly. Researchers brought in two groups of people. One group had to use a ton of willpower to resist eating these amazing fresh baked cookies and force themselves to eat radishes instead. The other group, they could eat all the cookies they wanted. Afterwards, they gave both groups a really difficult puzzle to solve, and the results were wild. The radish group, the one that had totally exhausted their willpower, gave up way faster. Their willpower muscle was just worn out. But here's the good news. Just like any other muscle, you can train your willpower. And it doesn't take anything crazy. Just 5 minutes of meditation a day can actually build more gray matter in the part of your brain responsible for self-control. A short walk outside, what they call green exercise, can give you an immediate boost. And getting enough quality sleep, that's non-negotiable. Being sleep deprived is basically like giving yourself a mild brain injury, right in the part of the brain that's supposed to make good decisions.
But even if you have a strong willpower muscle, our brains, well, they have some pretty sneaky traps that can trip us up. They can sabotage our best intentions, and we don't even realize it's happening. So the first trap is called moral licensing. It's this bizarre human tendency where being good actually gives us permission in our minds to then be bad. As the author puts it, when you feel good about yourself for doing something right, you start to trust your impulses more, and those impulses often lead you astray. And we see this play out everywhere. You go for a 5K run, so you feel like you've earned that giant greasy burger. You eat an organic chocolate bar, so you feel virtuous, and you end up eating the entire thing. There's even a study where people who just thought about volunteering for a charity were then more likely to go out and splurge on something expensive for themselves. It's like your brain checks the good person box for the day and decides, all right, my watch has ended, let's let the impulses take over. The second trap is all about our brain chemistry, and it is a big one, the dopamine lie. See, our brains are constantly confusing the promise of a reward with actual happiness. When you see a donut or get a notification on your phone, your brain releases a chemical called dopamine. But, and this is the key, dopamine is not the pleasure chemical, it's the wanting chemical. It's what drives you to seek the reward, but it makes no guarantee that you'll actually enjoy it. Has this ever happened to you? You're at the movies, just mindlessly eating popcorn. You finish the entire bucket, and it's only after it's all gone that you realize, that was actually pretty stale, and I didn't even enjoy it. That right there is the dopamine lie in action. Your brain was hijacked by the promise of the reward, completely ignoring the actual experience. So, okay, We know our willpower gets tired, and we know our brains have these sneaky little traps. The question is, how do we fight back? This last part is all about a practical toolkit you can use to rewire your approach to self-control.
Now, the single biggest trap of them all might really surprise you. It's guilt. When you slip up, say you're on a diet and you eat one cookie, the guilt that follows makes you think, well, what the hell, I've already blown it. And then you eat the entire sleeve of cookies. Guilt doesn't actually motivate us to do better, it just shoves us deeper into the exact behavior we're trying to stop.
So what's the antidote? It's not being tougher on yourself. It's the complete opposite. It's self-compassion. Study after study shows that when people learn to forgive themselves for a setback, they are far, far more likely to get back on track. Being self-critical just drains your willpower, but being kind to yourself actually boosts your motivation and your sense of accountability. And here's another really powerful tool, connecting with your future self. We often treat that person like a total stranger, right? But what if they felt more real? This number, 2x, is from a study where students who saw a digitally aged photo of themselves ended up saving more than twice as much for retirement. When your future suddenly feels real and personal, you start making better choices for them in the present. All right, let's just do a quick recap of the biggest takeaways. Willpower is really 3 different forces working together. It's a muscle that gets tired, but you can train it with simple things like meditation, exercise, and sleep. Watch out for your brain's sneaky traps, like moral licensing and the dopamine lie. Remember that the best antidote to failure isn't guilt, it's self-compassion. And finally, find ways to connect with your future self to make better choices today. So, in the end, every single decision you make today is either a gift or a burden for the person you're going to be in the future. They are counting on you. So my question for you is, what's one choice you can make for them, starting right now? Thanks so much for joining me.